You're in Paris today for the PSG versus AC Milan match, but
Yes.
you've donned your Fulham chapeau for a little bit because of the big breaking news yesterday. Marco Silva signs until 2026. We discussed it last week, Peter, and you said not much had changed, but the offer was there. Clearly, Marco eventually got round to picking up the piece of paper, signing on the dotted line. And you described last week, Peter, that it's possibly the biggest contract that Fulham will be signing in a long time. Do you still stand by that? I mean, it feels hugely significant.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. You can't overstate the importance of it. It's incredibly significant. Probably the most important signature in Shahid Khan's tenure at Fulham, I would suggest. It was, especially with this season, it was the one question that came out the window, the one question that came out the summer, and it's a topic that was only going to grow, I think, the longer the delay went on, the more conversations. What does this mean? And it won't just be people outside Fulham fans who'd ask that question. It would be players, prospective signings. Do the club then have to pivot and plan ahead for a replacement? All those kind of things. But the fact that he's put pen to paper, signed for what is another 3 years almost, it's another 2 full seasons on top of this one, is really important, not just for the current team and the squad, but also what it indicates about the long-term plans and ambitions of the club, of the owners. Marco Silva's not hidden his own ambitions, his own personal ambitions. That was part of the reason why he turned down those offers from Saudi Arabia in the summer. He wanted to be in the Premier League. And it's, you can see from what's come out, the wording that both Silva's used, what Shahid Khan's used, that they've got on the same page. So certainly this is it's incredibly significant and fantastic news really for Fulham.
Yeah, Jack, what was your first thoughts when you saw this one come through?
I think it was more surprised than anything. Obviously delighted with the news, but you kind of look at it and think, we came out of that game against Spurs. We weren't dreadful, but equally it didn't look like Fulham were going to score in a month of Sundays. And you're kind of looking at it and going, this season's... I remember texting my family being like, I think we're going to finish 14th, 15th, which is, to be fair, an upgrade on my my preseason prediction of 16th. But I was like, you can almost write this season off at the moment. Where Fulham stand with this season, it feels like there are going to be too many teams that are genuinely just quite a lot worse than us to actually end up, I think, right in the relegation mix. But equally, I hold very little hope right now that Fulham are going to be able to make a push up the table and cement. And look, if you'd offered us 2 seasons in the Premier League where survival was comfortable and assured before we got promoted last time, we would have all bitten your hand off for it. So I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it felt like a massive opportunity this summer to kick on from last season, and it didn't feel like it was taken with both hands. And so I was thinking about it and going, why would Silva commit at this point to a long-term deal? Now, obviously it's 2.5, 3 years, so it's not a kind of tie him in Alan Pardew 8 years for life kind of deal. But you kind of look at it and think, wow, that's a really big step for Fulham to take in a week where things look pretty doom and gloom. And I think that you kind of look at the cadence of Monday's or Tuesday's podcast and you listen to it and it's like, it's all pretty downbeat. And obviously the news came out about an hour later, and the kind of tone and vibe of the podcast, you'd imagine, would be completely different off the back of that. And I think that goes to show how important generally it feels like Silva is to this side, and therefore locking him down is a massive bonus. It's now about making sure that he's happy within this space to enable him to kick on and allow him to do what he thinks is possible with this squad. Because you get to a point with some managers, I think, and you go, right, the squad's good enough and the manager is struggling to now deal with it. And there have been plenty of examples, not just at Fulham, but across the Premier League. This feels the exact opposite. It feels like Marco Silva is trying to do things and hasn't got the players to be able to actually fully back that up. And I think that now the question becomes, all right, how do you force the hand so that Silva feels he's able to continually push this football club forward?
So, Peter, the question that will be on everyone's lips is, what does this mean for Fulham going forward? How much of an impact was Silva not signing a contract for Fulham's transfer policy in the summer? And what promises do you think Fulham will have made him? Because I think it doesn't take the brains of an archbishop to realise that Silva's not signing a contract unless he's been given some promises, some offers, at least some commitment of future funds. Because I'm sure if you asked Silva whether he, truthfully, honestly, maybe not under the kind of like disguise of a press conference, whether he felt fully backed in the summer, I'm sure he would say no.
Yeah, I think over the summer I wrote about how it didn't seem likely that he would sign a contract until after the window. That window felt like it played a key part. There was obviously the interest in himself and other players, the uncertainty about what the squad would look like. In terms of your first bit of your question about whether it would impact players, it did. I think we reported about, with Willian, for instance, there was that delay, and part of that, was trying to, is Marco Silva around, because he had that interest at a similar time. So, of course, it's a factor, and we know it's a factor for the squad because so many of the players come out and talk about Marco Silva's influence, about the project. That's a word that Marco Silva's used consistently. That's what's brought these players in. Players like Bernd Leno, like Joao Palhinha, like Andreas Pereira. They can see what Marco Silva wants to do, the way he plays, and they buy into that. Obviously, by signing a contract, to build on what Jack was saying, it indicates that he feels there is the backing to progress, to fulfill those ambitions, as I was talking about before. It's a commitment for 3 more years, and in that sense, you would expect that it will get the support from that. These things will all come into the negotiations. We'll find out in the next couple of days once I'm back at home what's been going on. But it's certainly the fact that he has signed it, because I remember going back at the start of the summer, coming into the summer, and obviously it was a talking point, and we'd written about it a couple of times, and it just felt like uncertain. It didn't feel particularly certain that it would happen. In the same way that there wasn't certainty about Joao Palhinha, in the same way there wasn't certainty about Alexander Mitrovic, it felt like it was in that bracket. And now it's come through to the point where it's happened. And then for me, anyway, when I saw that, it was like, okay, he signed, and considering where the team was at and where he was at and how the club was looking at the start of the summer, this suggests that he's had. Suggests he has had reassurances that he can take the team forward and achieve what he wants to achieve.
Jack, I feel like one thing that I thought with Marco Silva, and why I was not sure that he would sign another contract, is because you look at Marco Silva's managerial career, he's never stayed in one place for very long. I mean, the longest he stayed at any club was Estoril, his first club, which was only 3 years as well. So by this summer, it will be the longest that he's managed any club in his career. He famously, moved a bit too soon, didn't he? Previously, he's been very anxious to kind of move up the levels. And that was maybe one thing for me where I thought, does Marco want the next stage? Does Marco want the next club? Because he clearly wants that, top 6, top 8 club in the Premier League, or one of the major leagues anyway, where he can step it on to the next level. So I guess from Marco's point of view, why do you think he's committed for this length of time? Do you think that he realises now maybe that the managers at most clubs seem fairly stable, and that he'll probably need to do another year or two to when he wants to get that bigger move, which none of us can blame him for eventually wanting?
I think the truth of the matter is that if he'd wanted to move for, a big fee, he would have gone to Saudi Arabia this summer. So clearly, if he's going to move on, it's going to be to someone who has some sort of standing. And therefore, signing a 3-year contract isn't all that much of an issue, if you're going to take my point. And I don't want this to sound doom and gloom, but, if Benfica decided they wanted another manager, which did look possible at one point a couple of years back, and we thought, that could be a little bit uncomfortable, you'd imagine that they have the resources/facilities to buy someone like Marco Silva out of a 3-year contract. And I would imagine that's what it is. He's looking at this and going, right, there aren't all that much in terms of the market, there isn't all that much in terms of what's going on, and clubs that are desperately looking for a manager. And any club that, clearly having turned down just a money move, he's looking for a club that clearly is a big step up to Fulham. And you have to kind of bear that in mind with the Estoril move, right? Yeah, 3 years there, fine. But he moved to go to Sporting. It wasn't like he was like, okay, cool, I'm just going to walk out here for any old job that's coming up. He moved to a massive, club. And I think there was 2 days between him leaving Estoril and him signing the deal at Sporting. So it was clear that time was up and that option was available to him. So that would be my thoughts on the matter. It's not necessarily about, meaning that he's going to leave or any of those things, but I think that the kind of clubs that he would be wanting to leave Fulham for, and so we're talking, as you say, European challenging clubs across maybe the top 4 leagues in Europe. Any of those clubs would have the facilities if they needed to buy him out of this kind of contract. And so therefore, I don't think, from his perspective, it's all that much of a risk.
It's like anything when you're a club of Fulham size, if the Manchester United come in for him, suddenly there's a conversation. But what it means, at least for at least the short, certainly this season and going forward, that Fulham are able to plan around him and around his team and around his ideas, and that's a massive boost.